Right, let's have a few examples of asynchronous operations. So async operations is basically things that are happening independently of the main thread. And what the main thread is basically the execution of scripts that you see in your file. So in this scenario you have a function called setTimeout. It takes a callback function, an anonymous function that does some type of work, and then it takes this number input, which in this case is a millisecond. And then you have a console log down here. Now the main thread will be what's happening here. So it will fire off this event here, and then it will go to the next line and fire off the next thing. And in a synchronous operation, all of this will happen one after the other. However, set timeout is an async operation, which means that it's going to be put outside of the main thread. And we can see that by copying this, opening our example file here, and going to that file. So now we open the console, we copy that in, and as you can see, this runs before the above, and this will run after the next line. So the async operation happened after the console log, and that's because the main thread was executed, this work was put on a subthread, and then it was executed after the main thread was done. And the reason why this is happening is because when you're isolating something through an async operation, that thing that you're doing is happening in its own world. And you'll see why this gets useful when you want to do a lot of work that you want to happen without blocking what's ever happening on the main thread. Alright, so let's have an example of an async operation that might be a bit useful to kind of illustrate how you can use these things. So let's create an element, which is a div, and let's set the number inside of that element. We call it myClock. We set that to 0, and we add it to the body, and then we set an interval function. So interval is a function that will run an async operation several times at a given interval, and we give it 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. So every second we will set the text inside of myClock into whatever it was plus 1. So we're creating a clock in essence. So let's copy this, go over to my browser and hit enter. And as you can see now, the thread set interval is incrementing this number every second. And this is a great example of an async operation, because if you have a timer, you don't want that to block everything else you're doing, because you might be doing lots of stuff on the page and it doesn't really have to block anything because it's a very isolated sequence of events. And yeah, this is a really great use case for an async operation, and hopefully this made sense to you. And yeah, this is pretty much how you do async operations.